Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
We say welcome and blessings to everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Jerry Teo, and I'm with the Healing Generations Network. And we're blessed that you decided to join us for this Healing Generations podcast, a series of discussions, dialogues, if you will, prayers, inspirations, in a journey to heal generations, but also in a journey to bring ancestral medicine, our culture, our identity, the teachings of elders, yelders, and young people of all people together so that we can prepare and hopefully give good medicine and good teaching so that the next generation has more blessings and less struggles. Today, we are very fortunate. I'm very blessed to have with us a good friend, really a good friend. I consider him a brother. A brother, I would welcome him in my home, introduce him to my children and allow my children to sit at his feet to hear his words. That's how much I respect Mr. Howard Stevenson here. But he is also, that other end, taken those lessons that he's learned in his own life and converted them into things that are appropriate according to Western society, too. So he's also professor of urban education at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. I also became aware right now, a little while ago, as I was kind of checking on a little bit on Howard, Dr. Howard, and he's a 2020 Gittler Award, got that for his contributions on racial, ethnic, and religious relations. Bless you, brother. I didn't know you received that along with the other awards. And you also, a lot of my interaction with you recently is in reference to Forward Promise and the initiative that addresses, disparities and issues related to boys and men of color. But we know your work is profound and really leads this movement in a lot of different ways. So I would just want to thank you, brother, for being on with us. And let's give you a moment to introduce yourself in the way you'd like to.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm also blessed having known you and met you. Every time I talk to you, I get a blessing and a healing just from your words and prayers. And, I think we met at an APA convention and or meeting in D.C. and it was then I knew I prayed that we could get together in the future. And your work is phenomenal, just having witnessed it, but also been a recipient. So I would say I grew up in a community. I'm the oldest of three. My brother Brian Stevenson is a famous lawyer down in Alabama. He wrote a book called Just Mercy and done some amazing work on getting brothers and sisters off of death row. And he's my younger brother. We slept in the same bed till I was 14, 13. When my father added on to the house. Under him is my sister. So it's the three of us. Brian is 15 months younger than me, and my sister Christy is 11 months younger than him. So it all happened together, and we're pretty close because of it, in a sense. And we don't think of hierarchy quite as much. But we grew up in southern Delaware, which is like the rural South. And I grew up in a multicultural family. Both parents were Black, but my father grew up in southern Delaware, raised there, very country, very rural. He was the kind of person that had us in church 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He believed that if somebody bothered you because of the color of your skin or treated you badly, you're supposed to pray for them, believing and knowing that God would take care of them in the end. And it wasn't our job to try to navigate putting our hands on anybody or physical. It was a spiritual warfare in his mindset. And he was more like the Martin Luther King in our family. And my mother, though, was from North Philly and very street, She grew up in North Philly, fighting in segregated neighborhoods, getting chased out of white folks' neighborhoods and ethnic neighborhoods, and she would chase people out of her neighborhoods. It was equal opportunity for her. She didn't back down. So when she came to Delaware, she thought it was a very strange place. So my brother and sister and I think of her more so. She's a very loving woman. When my brother talks about a very loving woman. But I like the part about her in public spaces where she would defend us and speak up when anybody disrespected her or us in public. So she was more like Malcolm X. And so in our growing up home, it was a battle of styles and attitudes and culture about how you navigate when people mistreat you. But it was always spiritual as well as practical, I would say, handle your business. And my job was to protect my two siblings. She gave me she ordained me to be a fighter if I needed to, on behalf of those two. And my father said when I was around 11th grade, 12th grade, he said, you can go to college, but you have to pay for it. And so in 10th grade, I actually, for the first time, picked up soccer in order to get prepared for basketball, because the game was basketball. And I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my goal. But it so happened that in 3 years, I was able to get a scholarship in soccer. And that was the only way I could have gone to college.
Wow.
And my brother followed me after that. And we were roommates in college even. But if it wasn't for soccer, I wouldn't have gotten to a lot of places, including
I didn't know you played
world.
soccer, man. I didn't know you played soccer.
Yeah, I ended up being, in 1 year, scored 25 goals in high school and was all-state. And that was after 2 years playing as a goalkeeper. And then I got the scholarship and I was All-American in 3 years. And then I ended up coming out to where you all are, Southern California, going to Fuller Seminary and played soccer at a Mexican league.
Really?
My first year there in Southern California. It was in Pasadena, and we won the league. I was the only black player in all Mexican league. And then the next year, I got picked up by the semi-pro league in Southern California that stretched from Santa Barbara all the way down to San Pedro.
Wow.
And we used to play in San Pedro, the stadium there. And I would say that has been a healing thing for me to play. And the last thing I'll say about that is I got picked up by a Brazilian team in that semi-pro league. And we traveled to Mexico, and we played club teams throughout New Mexico. And the only deal was I couldn't speak because I didn't know Portuguese, and it was a little scary to go down because I couldn't speak the language, but I loved the game so much, and the brothers, they really liked my game, and so we spent weeks in Mexico from city to city, traveling and playing, and my wife at the time allowed me to do that because she knew it was part of my heart, and I was going to graduate school at the same time in psychology, so that's part of the legacy. Yeah.
So you had you kind of, there was an indoctrination in terms of cross-cultural legacy and experience that kind of almost seemed like creator says, we're going to put you on these roads. You think you're playing soccer, but we're going to teach you some other stuff along the way.
It's absolutely true. And it ended up in college. I ended up going to Africa as well to play because of being a part of the African American team and seeing folks in Nigeria and South Africa before apartheid and Kenya, and it was a blessing. Yeah.
Wow. So you have obviously in a short time on a podcast we can't cover everything, but we are in the midst of, if you will, a pandemic, a racist pandemic, and for a lot of us that grew up during the time that we grew up, it's really triggered a lot of things. And it's triggered a lot of memories, a lot of wounds, a lot of issues. Talk to me a little bit about that, about what this reminds you of, or what you had to go through, in because I'm sure just living as an African American man in this society is tough, but then moving on through education, I mean, I can't imagine, what you had to deal with. So, can you share a little bit about those struggles and those lessons that you learned along the way?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Part of my mother's sense about dealing with and watching her fight was the sense she constantly suggested to us that we could do anything in the world, and that's scale anything. And part of that, even in being in a whiteness westernized setting as schools can be, to not forget where you came from. My father also believed in that view. They didn't always get along, but they worked together from their different perspective at times around you could be whatever you want to be, and don't forget where you came from. So my biggest challenge was if I were to go away, would I come back? The folks in church, would they still remember me? Would they still see that I hadn't changed? It was a big deal. It was a stressor for me. So navigating white spaces was challenging on one level because I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in culturally, but I believed that I belonged there. I could do the work. I could do the stuff. And the only thing was, could I maintain some sense of where I grew up, wherever I went? And so having my brother come to college, we kept that culture stuff cool. Going to graduate school in California was very helpful. And then eventually coming to the University of Pennsylvania. In between that time, I spent a lot of time in neighborhoods and communities. And I swore coming to Penn, the only way to keep a sense of my culture was to stay in those communities in West and North Philadelphia for my work. But as long as I saw it as a competition, I didn't feel like I had to give up on who I was in the process. So if the issue was how many publications, I could do that. Just the same way you say, how many goals I got to get to. And so I wasn't afraid of the competition, but I needed to study Black and brown people in my work. That was essential. And I remember telling a white mentor of mine who was very supportive in the beginning, that I wasn't going to come without doing that. And there have been some hard times, being the only Black professor in the psych program in ed school at Penn. The Ivy League thing never meant much to me, but culturally it means a lot to folks there. The way they talk to you. And so there are times I've had to literally learn what my mother has taught us is you slam people sometimes and then they'll leave you alone. It's not very different sometimes from being on the streets, that people will respect power. And on some level, being nice to them is seen as a sign of weakness. So on occasion, both directly and intellectually, it's good to challenge people to see if when they test you. And I found over time that people back away, but you have to respond. You can't just take it and expect people to respect you in these kinds of whiteness environments.
You allude to it and speak to it, but I wonder if you could speak a little more directly to it, because the sense that I get is that you were grounded, that your parents rooted you and grounded you in a sense of identity, in a sense of self-worth, in a sense of cultural rootedness. Some things that on your resume, or it's not going to say that. It's not going to say you were successful because your father was a certain way or acted a certain way, your mother was a certain way, and assuredly loving you, and assuring you that you're loved and that you're appreciated and you're valued. Must have had an immense, impact on you. Can you talk to the significance of that, especially, in your life, but also in the work that you do? Because we are working with boys and men of color. We're working now with, that balance of being really angry and really upset after so many years of this. And we see a lot of young people very angry on the streets protesting. And So what does this stir up for you? What are those teachings that you had to get through, and that you're still kind of processing with the work that we're doing now?
Right. Well, culture and rootedness all fit because I think the biggest fear was, even in getting a PhD, was that could I go back home and people still see me as how they helped to raise me? The people that helped to raise us in church, it wasn't just my father and mother. It was those folks who didn't finish school, that took an investment in my brother and sister and I, and still do. Even if my brother, as famous as he is, goes back home, he has to recognize those people who helped to raise him and to raise us. And if they call for us, we have to come. There's no, and part of that is what they've given to us. I grew up in a community very rural, but if you go 50 to 60 miles radius around where I grew up, there were people who knew us. And so we couldn't get away with anything without it getting back to my mother and father. That's how rooted we were, right? And then as a teenager, I hated it because there are people always in my business. But as an adult, I recognized that they protected us from afar. And even when they told on us, they were doing it for a sense of purpose and reason, and they believed in us. And so for me, it was a strength so that wherever I go, they're with me in some way. We use this African proverb, I've told you, the lion's story will never be known as long as a hunter is the one to tell it. And so whenever I go into these whiteness spaces, what I find is if I tell my story about my mother and father, about my church people, it brings a certain calm to me to then be myself in that space. Now, some people get something from it, but it's really for me. And it could include the prayers. You know, people in my community would say, we've been praying for you. Or they would, you know, when I go home, I have to sing a song, whether there's an instrument in the place or not. They remember that I was supposed to sing for them as a representation. And I use those songs in my own life. You know, there's a song I used to sing in my church, you know, when you get tired and you get tired to get 99 and a half won't do. And basically it's pretty much like, you know, Lord, I'm trying to make 100, but 99 and a half won't do. And it's a beautiful statement about commitment to who you were, right? Who you are and who else you're bringing up in the world that you can't be half stepping. So that's part of that culture rootedness. Yeah.
You know, it is beautiful, half stepping. You know, I remember that word deep in the neighborhood I grew up in, Compton. But you know, you again reinforce the significance of being interconnected, of having a responsibility larger than yourself. You know, and recognizing those that brought you through and brought you up, but that when you go back, I mean, it's deep that you say, will they recognize you, right? Will they recognize you? And I think, you know, that's one of the difficulties because I think many, you know, especially African-rooted people know in their spirit that they're sacred, that they're valuable, that they come from a culture that is, you know, very rich in teachings, in medicine, in knowledge, and in wisdom. But then when you get treated the opposite, when you are not even seen, when you're not even recognized, or when you're seen for all the opposite of you know, of those blessing ways that the elders share with you, what does that do to your spirit? What did that do to your spirit, and what do you see it doing? I mean, to the spirit of you know, Black and brown people, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to watch because, you know, the phrase I use, we have to be careful swallowing the Kool-Aid of that poison that we were thrown at us, that's fed to us. And then social media, through a host of ways, is coming faster than we teach. And the thing that actually helped me, even in a place in the whiteness spaces, has been, you know, the studies that I was doing early was about racial socialization. It's really about my family growing up or neighborhood. It doesn't matter when family or communities talk to you about navigating race. And the work that you all do around in compadres is a constant multi-level set of processes to socialize young people from the cradle to the grave on who they are and who they belong to. And in a sense, that's what I was just trying to study. So everything I was working on was still affirming to me, right? I could work in all Black neighborhoods and brown neighborhoods and get nourishment and then go to the whiteness spaces and still be able to hang. But seeing the trauma of Black and brown folks have to swallow that hate without any of that protection without any of that affirmation of humanity is hard to watch.
Yeah.
But it's powerful to see when folks get some words about that, get some prayers about that, get some interventions about that. So when I thought about intervention, I was thinking about what if I could bring my definition of village from where I grew up to the spaces where we're working. So if we go to barbershops, how can a barbershop become a healing village? Because barbers are something
Yeah.
else, man. They see themselves
Yeah.
as healers. He said nobody knows what we do, and we spent 7 years with barbers, just black barbers, give them a little training around counseling, and then they took over. So we just want you to use your style because they know how to persuade.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They have a captive audience in that chair. They told us we've helped gang members come together that were ready to fight each other. We've prevented murders. And they said because they trust us, right? And the brothers who go to the barbers, they told us, there's no place I can go where 95% of the time I leave that space looking good and feeling good about myself. There's not many places I can go where that happens. But part of that is, where do we bring our village to these spaces where people also see as healing spaces, right? Playgrounds, basketball, soccer. The benefit of being in soccer, which is for me a kind of medicine, is that everything goes on in a field, in a competition, where you can see hurt, you can see trauma, you can see pain, you can see strength, you can see perseverance, you can see you can see anger and hostility, but you can also see that managed in particular spaces for a common goal.
Yeah.
And so playgrounds to me are spaces where we get to work out a lot of things. So I can tell a lot about a person, their strengths and weaknesses, their fears, by watching how they move as much as how they talk, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And that's cultural. I think that's still black and brown folks, that's ancestors, that's history. So it's more like, can we bring the village to places where their folks are traumatized by these stereotypes that you're describing?
You mentioned soccer, and I played soccer for a number of years, not nearly at the level that you played, but you mentioned all the different moves, and what we had to watch out for is for the trickster, man, the guy that grab your shirt and trip you and then fall and make the ref believe that you fouled him. Right.
Yes.
And I think that's what goes on in society a lot.
Absolutely.
That what we call in the neighborhood the okie doke. Watch out for the okie doke. And where you minding your business in the street, you're doing what you need to do, and then you get pulled over by the police. And if you say one thing, it's like giving them license to shift everything and to move. I know for a lot of young folks that we work with, when we try and teach them about respect and about honor and about fairness and about, trust and about love and all of that, but they live in an environment many times that doesn't reflect that back to them. It's this disconnect. Yeah. It's this distortion that then ends up in our bodies.
It does.
It ends up in our bodies, on our face, on the way that, So I know, you've done a lot of work in these areas in terms of the psychological impact, the trauma. You write a lot about stress and trauma. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, about how racism, the stress and trauma of racism and how that impacts, our communities every day?
Yeah, I think even looking at the resilience of black and brown folks, sometimes we have to count the cost of what it means to constantly withstand the weathering of racism. And even watching my mother, we all, frankly, the three of us could learn how to pray, but we also know how to curse people out in 20 seconds, right? We learned certain skills because of her. But we looked at her sometimes as very strong, but there were times in which you could see it wearing her down to have to navigate a world like that, right? That before we would go to the supermarket, she would pace back and forth, talking to herself, I'm so sick and tired of these people messing with me. And there's a way in which we know more through a lot of research that the stress and trauma affects our bodies in particular ways. It's connected to breast cancer in black women. It's connected to cardiovascular illness in black and brown people. And even teenagers it affects sleep quality. And you say, well, if something is that powerful to affect how you sleep, that your motor is still running while you're supposed to be, low in blood pressure, you're supposed to be getting replenished, that this stuff does the power of this stress and trauma is enormous.
Yeah.
So it's related to mortality as much as it is an abundant life and everyday life.
So what has been your experience? Because you lived through this and obviously have a lot of family and friends, but also colleagues that have lived through this. What is the counter? What is the medicine? What are the teachings? What are the practices?
Sure.
And maybe you can share a little bit about what has helped you, and then what you found across the board in terms of, culture and identity and all. What are those things that are significant? I mean, first we have to survive, so we have to counter that, and then we can talk about systems change and maybe racial equity. But what is the medicine? What are those teachings?
Well, I think obviously, and I appreciate you had to remind me a couple of weeks ago about the okie doke, because I found myself even, being more angry at the game instead of understanding that game in a way that it plays out. And so, that proverb has been central to me for 30 years. The lion story will never be known as long as the hunter is the one to tell it. Because in essence, a key truth of medicine in that is that it's no one else's responsibility. It's your responsibility to tell your story. And in a sense, where do we have the villages and relationships that help young people fall in love with their own story? That's what I think my job is. That's what I hear your job is. I'm helping you to fall in love with your own narrative. There's nothing wrong with your history. There's nothing wrong with your culture, your medicine, your ancestors. But you have to believe that. And so for me, going into these whiteness spaces, I used to make the distinction between belonging and fitting in. And at some point, you try to fit into a space that's not really for you. That's not healthy, right? You shapeshift yourself to make people be comfortable. That's not healthy. But I say to myself, I belong here because I can do the work. I have the skills. God is the creator. The answers are giving me the tools to navigate this space, but I don't have to fit into it. And so that's one thing. Can you belong without fitting in? Can you tell your own story? And that's a lifelong sort of journey in a particular way, right? So, and how do you fall in love with that narrative? How do you fall in love with your own people? Some of us are still stuck. The trauma, you could say one aspect of racial trauma is that we learn to think of each other as inferior. We look down on each other. But I find that when people come an awakening to their own story, and appreciate it. And I think in the telling of your own story, finding that other people resonate with it is an affirmation of who you are. And your work and the terms around interconnected sacredness, to me, sort of wraps up this notion of, your life and your history is sacred, and you must appreciate it if you're going to benefit from it.
Yeah, you mentioned belonging, because I've struggled with that term too. Because it is so close to fitting in,
it is.
And the belonging sometimes is okay. They use words like inclusiveness, and
right.
And we'll give you a spot and we'll give you a space, and let's look at the demographics, and so we'll have 2 African American and 1 Latino and 1 Asian and so okay now and we will co-create this process, but to me, it's a larger issue than even belonging. It's a sense when we mention that interconnected sacredness, do you recognize that what I bring, what my people bring, is integral, and on par with everything that you bring? And in fact, if you don't recognize it and incorporate it, you can't be healthy either.
No,
so to me, it's a larger shift from just belonging. But it really is a narrative change and a retelling of this story of this universe, because the universe has been on a linear track, right?
Yeah.
Because I listen to people like Baba Greg Hodge that talks about that our history did not start with slavery. And so much of the narrative starts there. With when people are talking about, when people talk about us as my native and Mexican side, they talk about 500 years. No, we have a history much longer than that. And what also comes through to me is remembering in Compton, there was heavy racism and oppression and violence all over. But, I always talk about when I walked in my best friend Tyrone Mosley's house and his grandma, Miss Mosley, was singing. Something happened.
Sure.
That medicine of that song, just did something. It healed me. It healed me. And I, of course, I'm not from that root, per se, but it was the medicine of that root that could heal everybody. You mentioned singing, you mentioned song. I wonder if you could talk about those, I guess I would call them the non-tangible things, the prayer, the songs. I don't know if you be willing to share with us a song. I know you got a little voice there, give us a little medicine that can remind us. I don't know. You don't have to, but at least talk about the impact of that and the significance of prayer, of song, of whatever practice that you see. Because I think, in our communities, there was something much deeper. There was, and still going on.
Oh my God, yes. So a couple of things come to mind. One is, first, the notion of belonging to me also means that I belong in this universe. I belong anywhere that God has created a space, so that the other people or contexts are secondary. And I connect that to what you think about regarding sacredness and interconnected, that it is not questionable.
Right.
So because I belong everywhere, right? And the question is, what is my mission in these spaces? And in many respects, I think we can change the climates that we go into, and that is part of my purpose and job. And so I bring my people with me. So the people in the church who used to sing and pray, there's a song that we used to sing, my mother prayed for me, had me on her mind. I'm so glad she prayed for me. And it would go on to my father prayed, or my people prayed. And in the sense that when I think of belonging, I think I bring those people with me, right? My father would call us up every week and said, I prayed for you, just to remind us, right? And we took it for granted. We didn't fully. But in a sense, as I'm older now, I see the meaning of that. And, there is a song, there's so many songs I'm trying to think of, but, there's a song, it goes, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. I'm a soldier in the army. I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. I'm a soldier in the army. I believe I'll die in the army of the Lord. And it goes on and on and on to the point where my mother was a soldier. My father was a soldier. And it goes on in the sense that, being a part of this work is that you are going to have to fight, but you're not doing it alone. And in a sense, it doesn't take much. Like you said, you walked into Tyrone's house. My house was filled with music all the time. My mother is a musician. My sister's a musician. My brother's a musician. I was a bongo player, drummist, in a sense that we started with my sister and brother and my cousin who lived next door. And it just the four of us forced to sing in front of crowds in churches that ended up turning the whole neighborhood into a community choir of about 40, 50 strong, which in my neighborhood is a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the two of them didn't always get along, my mother and father. They created that and made space for us. But singing was healing, right? If you're in struggle, you can listen to a hymn, you can hum a hymn, and it will lift your spirits. And I have 1,000 songs. People know me. I'm singing all the time. My sons are kind of tired of it, actually, right? But to your point, that the praying and the singing puts you in another space. And the last thing I'll say, when I was playing in Nigeria, we went to this Nigerian church, and there was no instruments. But the choir, everybody started singing in that church. And it was such a spiritual lifted space where, you feel yourself lifted, where you realize this is not about what you have in terms of resources. It's what you don't see that you have in terms of these spiritual resources. And that's carried me everywhere, I have to say.
Well, and as we talked about earlier, in the same way that trauma, racism and oppression and can impact your body, so is the opposite true. That your culture, that the song, the vibration of something that is spiritual, that goes generations back, that has reverberations for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, can have that ability to impact you and dislodge that anger and dislodge that the feeling of inadequacy, if only for that time, if only for that moment. It's a memory. It becomes a memory. And I know now, right now, recently meditation is so popular. Everybody wants to meditate. But I believe in, I remember feeling now in a very similar state when in my house, when that music would be going on, and Miss Mosley's house, I felt I know my biological rhythms changed. I know that now, know. And I think that's why you sing. That's why I sing. Yeah. I sing, traditional native songs, but I also sing oldies, man. I like, I feel good when I'm, singing Temptations and Smokey and some oldies, because it reminds me of a good time. It reminds me of when me and my friends were together. Sure. And in spite of everything was going on, we were happy. We were acknowledging each other. We were, having fun, and so that's medicine too. All of that is medicine.
Oh yeah, Stevie Wonder. In some respects, the thing I loved about Stevie Wonder was that you could cross everything, including your skin. Your skin was beautiful. The song, I wish, looking back on when I was just a little nappy-headed boy. And I thought about, I'm a nappy-headed little boy. He's singing about me, right? Yeah. So I'm in the center of this conversation, of this moment, in a way that all the other traumas you just described keep us out of the center. That's beautiful.
So as an elder, and I know sometimes we don't want to consider ourselves elders. We're saying we're still young, but you are. You're looked up to by so many people and have paid your dues. You've paid your dues, and you carry yourself in that way that in that honorable way that I think your grandmother would be very proud. So in that respect, I want to ask you, what would you tell this next generation? What are some teachings that you'd like to leave them, that you'd like to make sure that they don't forget, that make sure that they incorporate in their spirit? Because as you said, we're soldiers. This is part of a battle, and we need to be on that battleground. So what are these teachings that you'd like to impart to them?
I think, to tell your story, and fall in love with your own story and listen to the stories of others, and just, appreciate the time you have with family, folks who are here. Ask 1,000 questions, in some respects, it's also to the young people and the elders. Some of us who were young, we were annoying because we asked so many questions, right? Yeah. And it wasn't just answers. We were looking for debates as well. We were looking for arguments that would help us learn more. And so I was both to the elders to tell your story as well as young people, so to encourage them to be inquisitive, that their being annoying is part of that development of voice. We don't want to take out the sass from our children or the sort of attitude, because that's part of the sojourner truth. You don't become a sojourner truth, or you don't become a Harriet. You don't become a Malcolm without a little attitude.
Mm.
And so I think I would say to young people, I'm not afraid of your attitude, and embrace that attitude. We all got to learn when, like you told me about the okey doke,
Mm-hmm.
everybody ain't going to appreciate that as sacred. But, find and join with other people who appreciate your attitude and your style is sacred. But the other thing is, don't let somebody else tell your story.
Mm.
Tell your story, heal the village. That's what I believe.
Mm.
And in many respects, you could be around your people, you could be by yourself, but you won't be alone if you hold on to that.
Yeah. As part of this question, I want to dig just one a little bit deeper into this because there's so many people, and we talk about young people, but there's elders that are still wounded. They're
Hmm.
still acting in wounded ways. One of our struggles in our community, in our work over the last 30 years is trying to get men to be honorable fathers, to give up that drinking, to put down, the false ways of honorable manhood that we've been colonized with.
Yeah.
What do you say to those, and I say those of us that are
Hmm.
still wounded, that are still don't have those connections to elders, that didn't grow up with those sacred teachings and all of that. What do you say to them that maybe might help them
Hmm.
make a turn and take that first step towards sacredness?
Yeah, I think as you're talking, I'm thinking of so many men in my head, but also family members who, one is there's never too late, right? There's never too late to heal. It's never too late to tell your story. Even if you've never heard anybody tell you a story that you could learn from, or even if you haven't heard anybody to listen
Mm.
to your story, it's never too late. And I get that from both my parents. My mother actually didn't. She started taking a college course when I was in the seventh grade and didn't finish until after I had my degree and my brother had her degree. We didn't go to our graduations, but we went to her graduation when she
Mm.
graduated because it was that important. It's never too late to heal. I think the other thing is I found a lot of the elders that I run into eventually, no matter what has happened, who have children, want a connection with those children, no
Yeah.
matter what they've done, no matter what they've avoided, that to hook into that sense, that when our elders are ready, sometimes it may be in the last year, but it's still worth it for for them to share their story no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, um, those are the two things that come to mind. I'm thinking of men who and the other young men who decided they weren't going to say goodbye to a loved one who had treated them unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that they regret that after a few years and
Yeah.
wish they had made a final statement or a final conversation. Um, so it's
Mm.
never too late.
Right. So the final question that I'll ask you is, we are in a time of transition, a time of challenge. What is needed right now? What is needed for us to move to a place in which, this country, this universe can acknowledge, recognize all people as sacred? What is needed? Because, we're in a time now where it seems like some people are listening, seems like some people are paying attention, but we got to keep the focus. So, what would you say as in your parting? What is necessary right now? Would you say that we need to do individually, collectively, as a nation, whatever?
Yeah, I think three things come to mind: reckoning, illiteracy, and healing. And reckoning is sort of we got to stop lying. We got to
Mm.
tell the truth, and that's true for everybody. I mean, we see leaders now who lie every day. It's a new lie every day,
Mm.
maybe three or four new lies every day, and we should be upset by that.
Yeah.
But if you're a university, if you're a church, if you're a community, coming to a reckoning of how maybe you didn't hold up to standard, and sharing that means we can trust you better,
Mm.
right? We can trust you. These corporations that have contributed to enslavement and genocide, just say you did it. honor the history of so many people that has been hidden and they couldn't get recognition. When my brother opened the museum down in Alabama, down in Montgomery, the Alabama, I think it's the Constitution, one of the newspapers had to admit how they contributed to the lynching of those black and brown folks in Alabama and the surrounding counties by publishing when the lynching was going to be. They participated. And so they benefit, the revenue in that institution is benefiting because of Bryan's Museum has added revenue to that entire city, and they benefit from that. But they started out by admitting, here's how we led to this horrible experience in this country. So reckoning. Secondly, illiteracy. What do we know about how to navigate these spaces? What do I do when I know about this history? Well, how do I treat people? How do I humanely engage the interconnected sacredness that you're talking about? And then the last thing I think is this sense of healing, where I think our interventions have to focus on folks at the ground level. What Anpal due to Flying Earth calls the genius in the community, which I believe, connecting to what people are saying. That our institutions are so far away from our people, right? Some people thought that, eradicating Woodrow Wilson's name off of the university at Princeton was a big deal, but people in our communities don't get why that's important, right? Some people need food, some people need money, some people need resources tomorrow. And that means we should be asking folks in neighborhoods how to heal, not just experts. So, reckoning, tell the truth, literacy, read the world as it is, and then healing is meeting people where they actually are.
Well, I want to just thank you, brother, for this time. We even though we've worked together over the years, because you're on your road, I'm on my road, we really don't get a chance to connect, and I'm hoping this will be one of many. As we continue doing this work. But I want to just thank you for who you are, and everything that you have done to make your people proud. But as you make your people proud, you make us all proud, because we are part of that, that, if you will, that family, that larger family that wants to heal this world, wants to make it better, wants to make it authentic again, wants to make it the way our ancestors really wanted it in that way. So, I just want to thank you and thank your ancestors and wish, you and your family, blessings along the way. As we end this podcast today, you can look up Dr. Stevenson and see the many accolades that he's had, but also he's written some wonderful papers, and you can YouTube him. He gives some wonderful presentations as well. But there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom there. I encourage you to look for it, because we're all learning on this path. As we come to an end today, I just want to thank you all for continuing to listen. As we attempt to create this dialogue, to create a path, to create if you will, a rhythm and a feel for us healing generations, but also for us moving in a direction how we can lift up the medicine and the history and the teachings of all people that way. And we bid you many blessings and have a wonderful day. Thank you all very much.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.